Michelle Shorts here for My Favourite Things. Today I have a clean and simple floral card to share with you using products from the April release. So let's get started. This is the Flowers and Filler Dynamic set. I absolutely love it. Got lots of different flowers and foliage in this set. And then this is the Flower Foundations Dynamic set, and I'll be using the envelope from that set. I have cut it from some smooth white cardstock, and there are a few different ways that you can layer up this envelope. I decided to use all 3 layers and kind of do it as just a sort of general open envelope. I have then cut the flowers from lots of different scraps of cardstock and also the foliage as well. I used 3 different shades of green for the foliage just to have some added interest, and then also a few different colours for the flowers. I used some pinks, some purples and some aquas, and then also some yellow for the flower centres. These flowers here on the left do have 2 layers. You can actually use them however you want to. I really love this set because you can use it in lots of different ways. You can add different layers to flowers. You can use them separately if you want to. Lots of different ways to use it. But I did decide to layer these 2 layers together. There is actually a third one if you wanted to, but I left that off. So I have a darker shade towards the back of the flower and then a lighter shade towards the front. And then I'm going to add the stem on as well. So I'm adding some on point precision glue. I do dab off the excess from these little stems here just because I don't want any glue to kind of seep out, and then I can pop that on the bottom of the flower there. And I just think that's a really pretty flower. And then there is also a really tiny little one as well, so I'm just going to do the same thing. And I decided to cut these from aquas and teals, and then also 2 shades of purple as well. These colours probably aren't necessarily ones that you would find in nature with these flowers, but what I love about card making is that you can use lots of different colours however you want to. So I've now got my envelope here, and I've got that piece at the front just kind of laying on top so that I can make sure I can see what it's kind of going to look like towards the end once I adhere that down. So I'm taking some of the longer foliage pieces here, and I'm just sort of trying to figure out how I want to have them towards the back of the envelope, kind of sort of more towards the top. I want to have some things kind of poking out kind of like into the envelope, but then also sort of towards the top of the envelope, kind of flap there at the top as well. So there are a few different ways to kind of make flower arrangements with cardstock pieces. I tend to go for the method of sticking things down and seeing if I like them. That isn't always the best method. Sometimes I think maybe I should lay all the pieces out and then maybe use something like press and seal to pick them all up together and then add adhesive to them. But sometimes I quite like actually just making arrangements just by sticking things down as I go. So I decided to do that today. So I'm using some small dabs of the On Point Precision Glue, just adding that towards the bottom of these floral kind of foliage pieces. And then I'm bringing in some of the flowers here, seeing if I like that. And then again, I'm just adding glue more towards the bottom of these pieces so that if I want to add anything above it or kind of pop things behind it, I can still do that. So I think that flower looks quite nice in the middle there. It's a little bit of a larger flower and it's going to hide the bottoms of those foliage pieces. And then I can add the centre in there. And then I decided, because I have a purple flower on the left hand side, I wanted one to be on the right hand side as well. But this one is tiny, as you can see, so just popping that there behind. And then I did move that flower centre, so I'm sticking that back down. And then I'm bringing in some darker pink and just adding one of those flower centres. And like I said, you can mix and match all of these different flower centres together. You can cut things down, you can have things longer. Really nice that you can really customise it to how you want it to be. So I'm just popping some leaves down here, and like I said, because I only added adhesive to the centre of that flower, I've still got some room that I can kind of pop things behind. And I think this lighter purple here looks quite nice there towards the bottom, kind of filling it in that gap there. And then I do add some pieces down and see if I like it, and then maybe move on to something different. So I decided that I wanted a little bit more foliage towards the top, and then I can think about if I want those flowers to be there or not. So I did end up cutting this piece down, adding a little bit of glue, and then I can just pop that piece there behind. I wanted it to be a little bit fuller towards the top. But I do still want some of that envelope to actually be visible, because I wanted it to really look like an envelope. I think if I'd covered it completely, like really full, I'm not sure. I mean, you could see it's an envelope from the bottom, but I wanted you to be able to see that top flap a little bit as well. So just figuring out here where I want the last flowers to go, and I think that that looks quite nice, so I can just pop those down as well. And for these ones, I'm just popping the flowers down, and then I can pop the centre in. I'm trying to sort of make it so that the colours are distributed between the envelope. I didn't quite get it, I don't think. It would have been nice to maybe have had like 3 pinks, 3 purples and 3 aquas. It didn't quite work that way, but I still think it looks pretty. And then for the last piece here, I decided to have a little bit more of a leaf there on the left hand side, just to kind of equal it out a little bit between the both sides. And then once I'm happy with that, I can add some more On Point Precision glue onto the front bit of this envelope here, and then I can stick that down. You could definitely stick some of these layers down with some foam tape. I think that that would look really pretty. I decided though, but because there's so many layers of cardstock, it is actually quite dimensional on its own, and so I didn't really want to add any extra dimension to it. So just popping that piece there on the envelope to finish that off. I'm then going to stamp a sentiment from the Word Bouquet stamp set. So just taking that sentiment there that says wishing you the best. I'm going to stamp that down onto some black licorice cardstock. So I've placed that in the Mini Misty. I'm prepping my cardstock with an anti-static powder tool, removing the excess powder, and then inking up the stamp really well with Versamark ink. This is a clear sticky ink, so that when I add the embossing powder on top, it's going to stick to it. And I use the anti-static powder to hope that I'm not going to get too much excess powder where I don't want it. So just pressing that down in the Mini Misty, and then I can add some detail white embossing powder on top. And I do like to add this a few times, tap off the excess, just to make sure that I get nice coverage of that powder. And if I do get any stray bits of embossing powder where I don't want them, I can just remove that with a dry brush. And then I can heat set that until it's completely melted, and then cut that down into a strip. I've then got my card base here, and because my card is going to be really clean and simple, I wanted to add a little bit of detail onto the background. So I'm deciding to add some score lines. I really love doing this. I think it just adds a very subtle detail to it. It's not always visible in the photos, unfortunately, but in real life it just adds that extra touch. So I'm just going along here with my scoreboard and my bone folder, and I'm scoring at every ½ an inch. I've then added some thin foam tape onto the back of the envelope here, but I haven't added it towards the left hand side because it's going to overlap the card base. This is an A2 size card base, but I did cut off some of the width, so it ended up being 4 inches by 5½ inches. And then I've got my envelope behind. This is a standard A2 sized envelope, so I can just make sure that when I add the envelope hanging off the edge, it's still going to fit inside of that envelope. So I'm just bringing in my sentiment here, just making sure that that envelope is where I want it to be before I press that down. I'm then adding some foam tape onto the back of the sentiment strip, and I'm adding thin foam tape across the whole thing, and then a little bit of regular foam tape on the right hand side where it overlaps on the card base. Just making sure that that's going to adhere flat, and then I can pop that down. Just using some tweezers again to kind of hover it in place, make sure it's straight before I press that down. And then to finish off and add a little bit of sparkle, I'm going to take some silver gems, and I'm just using a pokey tool here just to help me out and pop them in place. And I'm kind of just scattering those around the envelope and a couple on top as well. And then I do finish off by adding one just to the centre of that flower in the middle. And that is the card finished today. Really clean and simple, but I love how those flowers are just bursting out of that envelope. And the scoring lines on the background I think really do make a big difference to a clean and simple card. Links to the products that I used will be listed in the description bar here on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.